works. Today we want to talk a little bit about responsibility, because that is the key word at GBTV. In life and on this program, it will be about responsibility. And we have the responsibility to tell you the truth, but we also have the responsibility to give you hope and present you with a solution. The press always wonders the secret of our success, and here it is. We don't treat you like a moron. We're responsible human beings. And the third secret of our success, I believe, is we try to give you the truth the best we understand it. I believe you can handle the truth no matter how hard or painful it may be. But if we ignore the truth, we enable ourselves to repeat the same mistakes that are made time and time again in history over and over again. If we don't do those three things, if we instead bury our heads in the sand, we'll repeat the same mistakes in history. So let's see if we can do all three of those things with the first story, and that is the 10-year anniversary of 9/11. I don't know about you, but I watched the 9/11 ceremonies at Ground Zero yesterday. We will be lucky at best if the next generation recognizes something actually happened on this date in history, 9/11. If you think that's impossible, try this one on for size. Does anybody here know that, everybody probably believes that 9/11 was the first major terror attack on American domestic soil, on the continental U.S., right? That's what everybody was told. And I'm not talking about the 1993 World Trade Center attack being the loophole. I'm talking about a major attack, one that happened 85 years ago. One so big it measured 5.5 on the Richter scale, and it happened here in New York City. Did anybody here know that? Nobody did. This show is going to spend the first half hour of our second hour showing history you never learned. That's next hour. But what is now history, the remembrance that happened yesterday, I think, was a complete and total disgrace. First responders were not invited to be represented at the 10th anniversary ceremonies here in New York. If anybody else is like me, those are the first people we think of when we think of 9/11. Those are the first people that should have been invited. They ran into the burning buildings while everyone else was running out. On a dark, dark day, their stories of selfless heroism inspired a nation, gave all of us something to cheer about, something to be hopeful, something to make us proud to be Americans. Those are the stories that we should be teaching our children. We should be holding those people up as an example. 10 years later, we don't even recognize them? Mayor Bloomberg said it's because there wasn't enough room for the first responders. Let me show you. This was yesterday. Can somebody please explain to me what all of this is? There seems to be plenty of room there, empty space, enough for a few thousand first responders to fit in. I was watching this yesterday with my two younger children, and they were asking me why the firefighters and the police were standing behind the people that were reading. Here's all this empty space. I said, well, they put them there because they were the first responders. They were the people that were there. And then they pan out and they show all that empty space, and you only see a few firemen, a few policemen, and they were just the ones on the stage. What do you say? Could we squeeze them in, and maybe a couple of clergymen as well? That would be crazy. No. Bloomberg said he didn't want to offend anyone. Mayor Bloomberg, I'm sorry. With your clergy-free zone, you offended me, and I think everyone else in America who knows that the sheer terror of 9/11 caused millions of us to do this for the very first time in a long time. We all got down on our knees. We all prayed. We all went to our house of worship. It was a slap in God's face yesterday, saying basically, we're good now. Don't worry. We'll call you next time we're freaking out. I was so turned off by the ceremony yesterday that I think they've tainted this memorial for me, and maybe I'm alone. Tainted this space. Actually, it's been being tainted for a long time. They're just finally, now I'm just finally kind of catching up to everything that has happened. We're just starting the construction on the World Trade Center, and you don't dare call it the Freedom Tower because that's too controversial. The owner of the property decided to remove the name Freedom Tower. Why? The major occupant? China. They want us now to call it not the Freedom Tower, but the World Trade Center. Believe it or not, the Port Authority says, well, we're calling it the World Trade Center because we thought Freedom Tower would make it too much of a target. Wasn't the last building called the World Trade Center? You can't even say the word freedom in America because your tenant doesn't like it. If that happens, you're in trouble. And what's funny here is their number one tenant happens to actually be our landlord for the rest of America, China. I went down Ground Zero on Saturday night. I was having dinner with my daughter at her apartment. She lives down in Lower Manhattan. And as we were leaving, they turned on the lights, those two big spotlights that should be there every night, quite frankly. I wanted to get back to my apartment and really kind of talk about it with my kids. By the time I got back to my apartment, it may have been around 10 p.m., and the lights were off. May I ask the city this question? Is that a green thing? Did the Audubon Society complain? Were the lights too bright over at the headquarters of CARE? What was the problem there? Those lights should be on all the time. And the Freedom Tower should have been built on 9/11/2003. You know, I couldn't go down to Ground Zero for an awfully long time because the memory of it was painful. My wife and I went down shortly after 9/11, and anybody who stood there remembers the smell. The smell of Ground Zero is something I will never forget. Now, however, I don't really want to go down there because the memory of 9/11 has been bastardized. 10 years have gone by, and all of a sudden there's a tower rapidly being thrown together. Did you even know about it? I find it grotesque. It reminds me of not doing your job until mom is already coming around the corner, and then you're like, quick, throw everything underneath your bed. And then I tried to go online yesterday with my children, and I tried to show them the footage that television will never show you of 9/11. Test this one out yourself. Go to YouTube and just try to find a clip of the World Trade Center collapsing. Try to find it. Try to find it without some Yahoo saying, and you'll notice the shadow planes don't match. Try to find a clip. Almost every clip is one of these truther freaks. And the sad thing is, it's happening because the media won't show the actual clips. Nature hates a vacuum. And that vacuum is being filled by people, some idiot, who thinks that George Bush and Dick Cheney got down and wired the World Trade Center with explosives and detonated them precisely when the planes hit the tower. Yep, that was the big plan. Bush and Cheney, they were embarking on that. As soon as they got into the Oval Office, that's what they were doing, you freaks. Maybe that's why the New York Times calls them cowards and false heroes today, because they blew up the World Trade Center. By the way, Paul Krugman, 9/11 is now a day of shame. That's what he said yesterday. It's interesting to me because I noticed that the points he made, calling it a day of shame, are nearly identical to the points made on a blog on AlJazeera.com. Al Jazeera and the New York Times, one in the same, finally. Welcome to GBTV, where we can proudly say we are very, very different from Al Jazeera. The truth of what is happening on 9/11 is suffering a slow and painful death. You ever wonder why your emotions are so raw when this anniversary comes around? Anybody recognize that you're surprised by your emotions? It's because we've been sweeping it under the rug. we haven't dealt with 9/11. After Pearl Harbor, quite frankly, we crushed the enemy in just a few short years. We went over, and excuse the language, kicked their ass, and then we came home. After 9/11, we really haven't done that, now have we? They're building giant mosques across the street from ground zero, but hey, we've got a pond and a place where clergy can't go, and a place that we've built where there's not enough room for the cops and firemen, and a light that goes off before 10 p.m. It's shameful. But so many Americans are just becoming indifferent to everything. We promised many times that we would never forget. But how can we expect our children to remember if we don't teach them the truth of what happened? How will they ever know? In New York City, 9/11 isn't even in the school books yet. How do we expect to fix the world if we don't admit to our history? Not only should it be in the curriculum, but they should have to see the planes hit the towers. The planes hitting the towers is video that most networks won't show. They should have to see the frightened and shocked people watching on the ground below. They should have to see the videos of people hanging out windows 100 stories above ground, trapped and desperately gasping for air, as an unimaginable raging blaze of jet fuel burns all around them. They should know that that fire was so hot that it was blasting out of the elevator shaft on the ground floor of the World Trade Center. They should have to hear the phone calls made to loved ones from people who knew the end was near. They should have to see that it was so bad that people decided it was a better option to jump 1,300 feet to their deaths. And they should know all of this. So they then ask the question, who? Who was responsible for all of this? Not only do we not show them this, we don't even allow them to say now the word radical extremist. Instead, we teach about the angry American citizen lashing out at Muslims just because they're Muslim. I'll agree, that would be a horrible thing. But show me, Mr. President, one time Muslims were rounded up on the streets of America. You cannot do it because it has not happened. Stop the lies. Studies show that 60% of Muslims here in America are concerned about radical Islam. But do you know that? When Peter King held his controversial hearing on radical Islam, the news was all about Keith Ellison giving an emotional speech. Notice nobody made fun of him crying about how mistreated Muslims are rounded up. No one reported on the poll that said 60% of Muslims are crying out for help. No one reported on the dad who testified of the dangers of radicalized Islam and told of how his son had been corrupted by this evil. The threat of radical Islam is not being taken seriously, but it is, strangely enough, being taken seriously by Muslims themselves, but not by us. That is because of an out-of-control media and an out-of-control government. They have been irresponsible. Muslims themselves are crying out for our help. I don't know if you saw the video today of the protest in London. There's a protest in London yesterday. Horrible. First, the 10th anniversary in London. Here they are burning our flag. Radicals were burning flags, chanting that the U.S. would suffer humiliation, blah-de, blah-de, blah-de. But do you know that there was a counter-protest by a group of Muslims? One man traveled over 100 miles just to stand there. The counter-protest signs read, "Muslims against extremism." And if you want Sharia, move to Saudi Arabia. Not only is the threat being ignored, so are the good Muslims. It's being purposely marginalized. This is a real problem. Obama moved to delete any references to radical Islam in our foreign policy documents. Quote, President Barack Obama's advisors removed terms such as Islamic radicalism from a document outlining national security strategy and will use the new version to emphasize that the U.S. does not view Muslim nations through the lens of terrorism, counterterrorism, officials say. Well, isn't that great? Let's all have pudding. Surely deleting Islamic radicalism from our documents is going to make everything better and make the boo-boo go away. America, you know and I know that's not true. This network will show you the things that are true, no matter what anyone says, no matter what the consequences are. I am beholden to no one. I built this entire studio and hired everybody on my dime. I don't owe a bank or anyone else a dime. If it doesn't work, I'm flat broke, but I don't owe anyone a dime. Here's the truth that you need to hear. 1, not all Muslims are terrorists, but all terrorists on 9/11 were Muslims. 2, the enemy of radical Islam is us. The enemy is radical Islam, and it is real, and it is evil. 3, ignoring the problem never solves it. Because of political correctness and ignorance, radical Islam is not on the run. It is creeping into mainstream America. Those sympathetic to radical Islam have flourished in the last 10 years, so much that a Canadian political activist, devout Muslim, and self-professed Marxist, this guy, we don't have anything in common. He recently warned about the influence of radical Muslim Brotherhood. Here's what he said in Canada. Watch.
Of bringing victory over the fascist forces of the Muslim Brotherhood. We now recognize that their infiltration is right up to the American White House. But we can't say that.
We will. Do you know that on 9/11/01 there were 1,200 mosques in America? Have we chased radicalized Islam and Islam? Have we been on a crusade? 1,200 mosques. Do you know how many there are today, 10 years later? 2,000. In 2010, the Muslim population of the United States, 2.6 million. In the next 20 years, that number is projected to jump to 6.2 million. On 9/10, I was sound asleep. All I cared about was the same meaningless crap that everybody else did. I was a dope. 9/11 jarred me awake, and ever since that day, I promised to be vigilant. I promised to figure things out. I remember on 9/11/01 being on the air and people calling me. What is the answer? I had no idea what to say because I had been sound asleep. But I know exactly what to say now. That is GBTV's mission. We are starting a movement in America, but the rest is up to you. It is the bookend of Martin Luther King's marches. Without a march for civil responsibility, all the marches in the world of human rights mean nothing. Martin Luther King knew it, and he showed us the way, but we have forgotten. His movement, along with all the other human rights movements since, have been distorted and grotesquely distorted and perverted. I intend to set it right and dismiss the clowns that intend to be the self-imposed civil rights activists that we have now. You are in the right place if you want to get off your butt and do something. We must separate ourselves from anger and focus on solutions. Radicals feed on anger. They feed on fear. We're not going to be fearful, and we're not going to be angry. We are the 10% that need to know exactly what they believe in and then never sit down. If you want to be awake, alive, and pushed out of your comfort zone, if you want to be educated and engaged, if you want to reach the end of your life and confidently be able to look your children in the eye and say, I left everything I had out in the field, I did everything I could. If you want to be involved in something larger than yourself, welcome home. You are in the right place. But you must not bring anger with you. I was angry yesterday, but it gets you nowhere. Radicals want you to be angry. They feed on it. Don't get angry. Become determined. Courage comes from determination. And I am determined to see America succeed, and I am determined to see radical Islam fail. I know it will because it is evil. And evil always fails in the end. But you have to look evil in the eye. Evil is a coward. If you missed the speech that I gave in Jerusalem, I want you to watch it tonight on GBTV.com. Here is the message in that speech that I gave to radicalized Islam while standing in their home court.